Hi, my name is Mark and welcome back to the channel. Today we are at Jamieson's of Shetland having a behind the scenes look at their mill to see the process of wool straight from the sheep here on Shetland all the way to the dyed fiber that you might find in a store near you or you might purchase online for some of your colorwork projects. So if you're interested in seeing some of this process, getting some of your questions answered, stick around and let's get into it. Today we're meeting with Louise, who is the manager here at the mill for Jamieson's of Shetland, and we are in Sandness. And behind us we have a beautiful bit of sea, ocean, I'm not sure which part we're on, and grazing sheep. So we're going to be looking at the process of sheep, wool, to yarn, to dyed yarn that you would use for your projects. And so behind us, we'll flip now to show you the mill, the outside of the facilities here. And it looks like a beautiful place to come to work every day. You've got the hills, you have the sea, you have the sheep, and today we're blessed with beautiful weather. I'm sure at other times of the year, it might get a little vicious weather-wise, but right now it's gorgeous. So let's hop inside, we'll meet Louise, and we'll look at the process of creating this fiber.
Okay, well, this is kind of how the process starts. We have another building down the road where we do the sort of the sorting and processing, because we buy all the wool from the local crofters, but not all of it's usable. So there are 5 or 6 different grades of wool. The 6th is really just like string, so nobody wants to do that. But up to grade 5 is kind of common, and there is only grade 1 and 2 that we use. Anything over that we sell on to another guy who makes carpet underlay and stuffing for things, and so it's a bit wasted. We just sell it on to somebody else. We've even this last year found an outlet for some of the stuff that is utterly unprocessable, and yes, by that bits I mean the poopy parts that are around the sheep.
We've seen a lot of poopy sheep in the last day, and I wondered.
There are always a few.
Yeah.
But it's now being used for peat restoration.
Okay.
Natural fibre, it's very solid. When they build up banks with it, doesn't disintegrate. Straw tends to blow away. It's kind of windy in Shetland, I'm sure you've noticed that. So we've even managed to use that for, it's fully pre-processed and it's going back into the environment that grows the sheep that gives us the wool. So it's kind of a nice cycle. Yeah. So anyway, after it's been graded, we take grades 1 and 2 up here. It looks like this when it gets here. It's kind of press packed in, it's about 500 kilos in a bag. And the first thing we have to do is wash it. Obviously, that involves a lot of places don't do it in-house. This is kind of what makes us unique. If we wanted to have it processed, we'd have to ship it to the mainland and ship it back again, which is what we're trying to avoid. As low carbon emissions as we can manage, but obviously being an industry, we cannot avoid it completely. But by doing this part in-house, it cuts a lot of that. It's called a fleece breaker, and it literally does what it says on the tin. It just tears the fleeces apart. It kind of shakes them a wee bit as well, so that all the dust and stones and grass and as much loose dirt as we can get out initially will fall out at the bottom of it. The tubes that you can see in the ceiling are just like a giant vacuum system. So once it's torn it apart, it sucks it up into the tubes and it pumps it through the building. And the machine that you can see peeping through the end there is the scouring plant. I'll explain that when we get nearer, but it passes to the scouring plant, it's back into the pipe system, comes back out here, and once it's finished in there, it's all fluffy and clean. So this is very dry, but finally it's usable. So you can see there is still some bits of dirt in it, but these kind of sort of bits of things like grass, it'll
the vegetable matter
fall out eventually as time as it's processed more and more it falls apart. The more that you break it up, the smaller it gets, the more it disappears. So it's really boring and walking bits. Okay, scouring plant is basically just a giant washing machine. So, but obviously it's wool that we're dealing with. So the one thing you don't want to do with wool when it's wet is agitate it. So this has slightly hotter than hand hot water. We use soap that's pretty much just like dishwashing soap. So it's great for breaking up oil. And the tank gets full, just like a hot bath. But what we don't do is this.
Yeah.
The spikes that you can see actually lift up, move backwards, and then drop down, and then push the fibre through the water. Huh. So it just kind of floats along, being shoved by the spikes. They don't move terribly quickly. In between the squeeze heads is just like an old-fashioned roller that you'd use for washing. Same idea, just squashes out the water. There's 3 tanks, soap, and then there's a soda ash that neutralizes the soap. And then the last one has a clean wash, just make sure it's completely clean as it passes through. Up at the end, you can see the ramp that feeds up into it, and then it drops down into the dryer on the end. The dryer is basically a reverse tumble dryer. Rather than the fibre going inside the drum, it has hot air that sucks through it, and it passes over the top of 2 drums, so it never actually tumbles around. And it goes back into the bales. This machine here is exactly the same piece of plant, but we use it for washing skeined yarn once it's processed so that the ball goes clean when it leaves the building. So same idea, slightly different makeup. So after it's washed, the next stage is the dyeing. So I'm going to walk again. He's actually drying the skein wool, as you can see. This machine here is just like a giant spin dryer. So we spin out as much water as we can and then feed them into the dryer like this.
Will those go into cones, or will they be portioned into smaller 25 gram?
Into cones and then portioned up into balls. You can't ball it from that because they haven't invented a machine yet that runs it directly off the skein into the baller machine. So this is the dye tank. It's basically just a giant pot. It's not very exciting, really. Our dyer is on holiday, unfortunately, so there's nothing to see, but we use chemical dyes, so they have to be boiled for it to become fast. So, moth. The worst thing you can find in an oven.
I hate moths.
Squash them.
I got it.
Thank you. Anyway, what we do is fill it with water about halfway, put the dye in. There's a pump at the back here that churns. So the dye, you dump the dye in, it churns the dye so it mix into the water completely. Then we fill it absolutely full. So you put 100 kilos into the thing. This lid actually acts as a press. So once it's in and it's squashed, can't move. Then you can boil it. So it kind of actually damages the fibre. Once it's stationary, then it's not the heat that damages, it's the agitation. So boil it till it's completely clear. What runs down that drain should be nothing more than weak vinegar. So if you haven't done it right and there's colour going down there, something went wrong. So dye is also excruciatingly expensive and nobody wants to waste money doing that. So as little waste product goes out into the environment as humanly possible. So once it's dyed, it's soaking wet, obviously, so we run it back to the dryer and it's packed into a bale. The next process after that is where we blend it, and this is where we make the heathery kind of colours. But we do it to all the yarn, no matter whether it's heathery or it's a flat colour. So this one here is also a dye tank, but this is one we use for skeined yarn. So there are a few very pale colours that we make, like lemon and orchid and rose. We can't get it clean enough on like a bulk dye to get it light enough. So this is why we do that. We wash it and bleach it, and then we put it on in here. So,
nice.
This is essentially kind of a tearing process that we do in here. Does kind of the same as the fleece breaker, but obviously it's slightly different. Those teeth in there are very long and very sharp, and it just rips. So it tears apart the wool that's quite small already, but we're trying to make it much smaller. It also mixes up, so what we'll feed in is like some are white, some are brown, some are red, and it all goes in kind of in stages. But this tumbles it. It just tears and tumbles, it feeds through the machine. There's a lot of sharp teeth in it, and then it comes back into this room in here, and you can see in the ceiling there is a very large fan. It turns, and the stuff comes out in teeny wee bits, and it's like snow. It's quite amazing when it's running. So we put it through this machine 3 separate times. On the first time, it just tears and mixes it up. And then on the second time, we add oil. And on the third time, we add water. Because the wool as it is very dry, and it won't card very well if we don't re-moisturize it. So I have ones that are on the ramp that are blended, so I can show you what it looks like when it's finished. Oh, yeah. This is what this one will look like when it's finished. This one is actually an ultra yarn, so it's got some lamb's wool in it, this one, but you can see how small the parts are. And if you squeeze it, you can feel the moisture inside the wool.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So,
Squeeze. Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the bits are a lot smaller than they were originally. So after this, the next part is the carding, which is pretty much the same process it's been done for thousands of years, but on a kind of a bigger scale. So, gonna go again. Brian is cleaning, but we do have another two that are operational, but this is kind of maybe better for explaining because you can hear in here where it's not running, but it's really just the same. It's what you would have done with hand carders, but we have hundreds of rollers that run it. There are big ones, there are small ones, there are ones with long teeth, short teeth, sharp teeth, blunter teeth. Essentially all it's doing is just combing. Just combing, combing, combing. Once it hits the middle of the machine, we collect the fibre back together again and we lay it out in the opposite direction, because then if there's any pieces that haven't separated up, it picks it up in the opposite direction and pulls them out. So there is one running next door, so we can comb that one. This is where it passes over and it gets collected. You'll see it running next door, but it just goes in the opposite direction and we comb again. The part that's really vital is the bit right at the very end. This part here is called the web. It essentially makes a piece of very, very fine felt, but it's not felted, if that makes sense. But it is in a fibre, like a flat fibre. The tapes that you can see here are kind of sticky. They stick onto the web and then they split apart so that it starts to make an individual weight of string. The next section is full of rubbers and they do this so it actually starts to rub into an actual thread. And as it comes off the end, you have a soft roving.
Oh.
It's a soft roving. So the first thing, it looks like a thread. This one is actually for the heather weight, for the arms, that kind of chunkier one, so it is a bit thicker than normal weight. So these ones will get recycled and put back in the next lot of the same colour that we do. We waste as little as possible. Ends of batches will go back into the next of the same colour. These ones here that are soft and can be reprocessed, we over dye them black and put them back in again in small quantities in other colours and other blends. Once it's spun, the next stage is to spin. No, carded, the next stage is to spinning. Sorry, you want me to do that again? So, when you're spinning, it just puts in like stretch and twist. So it stretches on the first of the rollers at the top, and then it pulls it through and it twists on the second set of rollers and then just winds them onto the bobbin. Once the bobbins are full, we put them onto the twisting frame, which is the plying machine that was next door to it. And it just puts them together in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever ply. One side of the machine, we run all 2-ply 21 cut spindrift weight that we put onto cones for the knitwear industry, like you can see in here. And the other side of the machine is where we do all the hand knitting yarns. So that one will do the thicker yarns and the ultra and the thinner ones and 3-ply. But the machine, the one side that we do, there's so much of it that we sell that we can keep that running constantly to just do that one type of yarn. It's not cold in here, that's for sure. After it's plied, you skein it up, wash it in the machine I showed you next door. Recone it, that's what this machine here is doing, it's running it back on a cone. And then the cones go onto the balling machine. Lauren is having a bit of a hiccup, so I'll take you to see the other one. This machine is the newest machine we have in here. It's also the most complicated one. The old balling machine, it wound the ball, but we had to do all the labeling and the bagging by hand. So during the COVID-induced knitting insanity, because that's the only word I can use for it, we couldn't keep up. We were so far beyond busy. We were quite lucky in that Shetland was quite isolated, so we didn't have an awful lot of issues with people being home like for months at a time. So we were still in production, and we decided we would have to get another balling machine that made bags of wool a lot faster. So this machine winds the ball, puts the band on, puts the band onto the ball, picks it up, puts the ending, and it packs it automatically, so it's a lot quicker. If Mike is finished making labels, we'll swing back around so you can get a bit of footage of it. So But once it's like that, it's heading out the door. Huge majority of it heads for America, Europe. It goes all over the place. So, and our own shop in Larry, which we sell a huge amount online. So, if you want, I can take you through to have a look at this to see if Nathan's machine is running, but it all sounds like it's switched off. So I'm not really sure why. But this is, you can see how it's kind of moving across. It would be nice if it was running, so I don't know why it's not. Okay, this is the last part of the process. This is where we make the knitwear. This technology we introduced in the late 80s, early 90s, because the hand knitting industry in Shetland took a real knock when the oil came.
Well, I read about that.
We, just at the same time as it suddenly was taken off as a product, the supply just dried up. This machinery wasn't supposed to be able to knit fair isle, jacquard to a certain extent, but telling my dad that something can't do something that he thinks it ought to be able to is a bit like a red rag to a bull. So he taught the machine to knit fair isle. So we now knit about 30,000 units a year on these machines. They're knitted in sections, so they're like back, front, sleeves, and pockets and things like that. And then we put them together on a linking machine upstairs. The linking machine is basically just a kind of a drum with teeth on it that can fit in a row of knitting. That's it running that you can hear. And it just knits in a row like knitting to finish the edges. Sure. So they do have a seam on them, but we use the same wool so that it kind of matches and it stretches and it shouldn't have the same effect. But we have just in the last couple of years put in a seam-free machine as well, and it knits a complete garment, sort of like this, everything's knitted together. The only thing we don't do is the necks because they don't have a good finish on them, so we're still putting them on by hand, but it can't knit fair isle at all. But it can knit stripes and it can knit plain garments and it can knit like ones with cables in. So we can use it for all those kind of styles instead. But this is, unfortunately, Helen has got a throat infection, so she's not in today. So that's right. And Gary is trying to do 5 jobs at once, so he's not been in here. But I can show you the whole garment ones as well. I don't know if there's anything on them, but you can see the difference. So that's the ones that come off the whole garment machine. So they are complete, ready to go. Other than you could have a neck on them as well, but they have a kind of a gap on the edge that we didn't like. It didn't look what we normally would make, so we just leave them. They just link on the necks. So, but these ones is both whole garment machines. I don't understand how it works because it just baffles me how it can knit 2 sleeves that are not stuck on anything. But anyway, that's kind of the process. Upstairs we have just like finishing, just steam, put labels on, things like that, wash them and press them and make them ready, and then they're packed up and off the door. The biggest market's probably Japan, but we sell a lot to Europe and more into the US lately. So anything else you'd like to know?
I wanted to ask about the colors.
Okay.
Like you're known for having a huge range of colors. And
it's mainly like driven by the knitwear because we've so many different patterns that we sell as knitwear. The range is huge and you can alter a fair isle pattern, take the same base pattern, but by changing the colours, it looks completely different. So it allows us to have fewer patterns but much more variation. So, and we're not just selling it to us, we're selling it to other people as well, and they use it, and there's no point taking it away when we need it, so we might as well just make it available to the public. There are colours that we've altered and changed and taken away because we had 2 that were nearly identical or something, and replaced them with something else that's a variation or something completely different. So we do very, very, very occasionally make a new one that we sell as a limited edition, but we haven't had time for doing that for a long time. So maybe some year for Wool Week. I keep saying we can do that.
And how did those come to be? Who was the mind behind the different shades?
Some of them are based on originals. I mean, the natural colours are obviously just the natural range. Some of them were based on what we used to be able to buy from hunters, but hunters have been closed for a long, long time. So they're kind of not exactly the same, but similar to things that they would have made. Other ones have evolved through demand, or somebody else asked us to make them, or we needed something to bridge a gap. My dad, he would have been the original person, but lately it's been me or Gary that's been kind of inventing them. So
amazing.
It's not an easy job. Inventing heathered colours never quite goes the way you'd expect it. You add something in and it turns brown. It's not an easy job.
Amazing. Well, they're stunning. I've been looking at a color card back in the States with friends, and we're all putting our heads together to see what colors I'll put together for a few different projects before we leave Shetland. All right, that's it for our tour today. I hope you've enjoyed coming along with us. Ned and I are so excited to be here on Shetland and have these opportunities. People like Louise were so kind to respond to my queries, my emails asking, can we come visit? Can we get a tour? Can we see what's going on behind the scenes? And can we bring a camera along? And so many Shetlanders have been so overwhelmingly kind and generous to welcome us into their studios, into their places of business, to show us a little bit of the history and what goes into creating these fibers and contributing to the knitwear industry. As always, if you have questions, things you enjoyed, anything you want me to know, let us know in the comments. You can leave a comment below. You can also message me on Instagram. You can write to me on Ravelry. And I love hearing from you. So I hope you're enjoying this trip, maybe like a tenth as much as we are, because we're loving it. Maybe you're enjoying it just as much as us. So thanks for being here for the ride, and make sure to come back to the channel. Make sure to stay subscribed and follow elsewhere on social media to see the rest of the things we'll get to do while we're here on this adventure in Shetland. As always, thanks for being here with me today. Happy knitting, happy crocheting, happy crafting to you, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Bye.